And I'll moderate this session. We aim it for it to be an hour, but if it's a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, not to worry. The purpose, as much as anything, is as we come to the end of the Year of Jubilee year, to look back on the raising awareness domestically. And so Cardinal Nichols will start, and he'll give an overview of where Santa Marta is. And as we finish this particular project on the domestic work, he'll then pass on to Kevin Hyland, who will speak about the current situation in the UK and I think Ireland, but maybe just the UK, and really the challenges that we're all facing in addressing this issue. Then Miriam will take us through some of the materials that'll be available for everybody to promote. They're available on the website now, but especially in the lead up to Bakita Day on the 8th of February, and then throughout Lent. And that's a continuation of a lot of the raising awareness work that's been done over the last few years. And then Fiona from CSAN will both introduce herself, but also CSAN being the new point of contact for this domestic work. So it'll be an opportunity for Fiona to talk about that. Then there'll be a short period really for any questions or contributions. So do join in if you want to say anything. But with that, I'll pass over to Cardinal Nichols to address you all. Father.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining in this, and thank you for all that you've been doing. I think we should begin just with a moment's prayer in this time of Advent. So we pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Lord God, you choose to come among us as a vulnerable, homeless child. Help us to see your presence in those who need our protection and our help to regain their dignity. Help us to see that your choice is a summons to us, never to view anyone as having no value, as being disposable, as being simply a means to something else. Prepare our hearts that we may welcome you this Christmas with simplicity and humility. We make this prayer through Christ, who comes to lead us and to bring us to our heavenly home. Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, everyone. As Alexander has just said, I understand this is a meeting that you have at the end of each year, this year being characterized by the Jubilee Year of Hope. Now, I'm sure you all know that the Jubilee officially finishes in Rome on the 6th of January, but in all the dioceses of England and Wales we're to celebrate an end of Jubilee Year Mass on December the 28th. December the 28th is also the Feast of the Holy Family, so there's, at least in my mind, there's quite a connection between the theme of the Holy Year as that of pilgrims in hope and the reality of family life in its brokenness and also in its fidelity. I've always been struck by the fact that the title of the Holy Year, strictly translated from the Latin, should be Pilgrims into Hope. It's in spem. And I like that because it means it's not as if we're walking our way confidently in our own ability and therefore ready to face any uncertain future. But actually, it's the present that's uncertain and it's the future that is certain, because that's the promise that we're given, that our lives have purpose, not that we will realize them each day. And this is particularly true, I think, for anyone who's been caught up, certainly as a victim of human trafficking. They lose hope, it's crushed, and their experiences, as we know, are very depressing and demoralizing. But it's the journey that in Santa Marta and the work that you all do, we're trying to resurrect for them, to say they can hold their heads high and see the coming of their salvation in the first gestures of support and love that are given so often when we meet with victims and those who've been rescued from human trafficking. So I think, that aspect of hope is very much underneath the work that you do. And then also the larger meaning of the word family, places of refuge, places of rescue, places where we try and bring people in, try to recreate a sense of belonging, which in a way is the very heart of family life. I know who I am. I know to whom I belong. And that is often lost by victims of trafficking. And so our work is about creating new bonds of belonging for them. And to do all of that, we need the awareness raising that I think you've been involved in parishes and dioceses in this country, in Wales and Ireland in particular. So as Alexander says, at the moment, we're coming to the end of the 3-year project of the Santa Marta Group that has been shaped and funded by the Goubet Foundation. And we're very grateful to that money that Goubet have given. They've decided that it won't continue. And that's why we've been looking for someone to pass on this work to, so that we know that what's the foundations and the progress that's been made in these last 3 years. And the foundation is content with that. But we have to make sure it can be built upon and not just left to perish. And that's why we're very, very grateful. I am certainly to CSAN for exercising the choice of taking on this work, and with Fiona being able, we trust, to build it up. I think that's all I need to say for now, but it's basically a big thank you for the work that's been started and the way that I'm sure you will be able to carry it on. And I do think it has those two underlying fundamental themes, that it marks the end of a jubilee of hope, but has helped us, it's certainly in my case, to understand more deeply what we mean when we use the word hope. It's not optimism, but it's a firm, reliable promise of God that there is purpose and healing for us on our way to that final fulfillment of hope in heaven. And as I say, it's fitting that some of this comes to a conclusion on the Feast of the Holy Family. So for all your work for family in the broad sense and all your work for hope, I thank you very, very much indeed. I think Kevin, now I'm going to hand over to, is that right, Alexander?
That's right, yeah.
Kevin will tell us that this battle is not easy, and he's a great one for spelling out the challenge. And so, Kevin, I know you'll do that very thoroughly, and you won't extinguish our hope, but you will introduce some hard realism for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence, and for the last 3 years on this project, thank you for your leadership and what we've achieved over the last decade or so, which I will reflect on shortly. And I think that, the work that's been done through this project, there has been engagement with most dioceses, if not all dioceses, but also other parts of parish life or other parts of community, whether that was some of the bigger events we held with police and with governments and with political leaders, but also what we had on every occasion at the heart of it. And it was something that the Cardinal was adamant on, was returning to the fact that this was about victims at the centre. This was about a term that he used on every occasion that I think I've heard him speak, was human dignity and the dignity of the person. And that was something that really has become at the core of all of the work of Santa Marta. And even when we're talking about the fact that there hasn't been the movement that we would expect internationally or nationally, the reality is that without the work being done by communities and groups like this group and other groups like it, the battle would be lost. There would be nobody there keeping it going. And sometimes, when it's tough, we're getting over the hardest bits. And, I think that there has been hard bits to do. There's been wonderful bits to be involved in, and that is just at this moment. This is going to continue, and we're going to develop on this in the future. But what I want to do is just really share a few things with you about where Santa Marta, not entirely where it's come from, because that story might be well known, but some of the things that have happened over the past decade or so, and what led up to this recent project. And this really grew out of work, developing relationships between policing, political world, the non-government organizations, and the Catholic Church in London. And then having, as we were privileged to have and still have a cardinal leading this, it was enabled us to lead it to the highest level. And as this shows, Pope Francis really had this in his work, his mission before he became the Pope, and then passed that mission on to Cardinal Vincent. And we decided that's what we were going to do. And over the following years, some of the things that developed, but I'm just going to show you now what one single case looked like that was actually dealt with from the heart of the Santa Marta Group. And this is a global map. But this was something in the UK with one person coming forward, and then the network of connections that were developed through Santa Marta working at their best. And this is what it looked like with one person coming into London. From what they were able to tell, with all the expertise, all the people working together, gathering the information, soon we were setting up a network of 49 properties across the UK. And of course, every time we found another property, we wanted to liaise with other partners in that area. This was in the UK, so that victims, as they were being identified, or the incidents, we could start to network it. And this all came, remember, out of a relationship with the Catholic Church in London. And then suddenly we're having this picture and we're starting to work, and we can have this network and informal relationships. And of course, as the police, we can look at billing and stuff like where the airplanes come from, their phones, and the money. But then we very soon ended up across the seas. And I recall going to Poland and the Czech Republic and other places much further afield, and engaging with Catholic Church relationships there who could also help us with victims there. And what we had was this uniqueness of being able to work with the victim-centered, being able to help the victims, but then as the driver of the operational end, being able to work on that. And that saw success after success after success, even to the extent where we were able to gather information in other parts of the world. And there was a conference in Rome last week, and it was one of the things that was spoken about is the way that the Catholic Church, or people in civil society, or people in faith, can actually have a feeling of what's going on in their community, much more than perhaps the state will. They will have that soft intelligence, not the hard numbers that 2 and 2 equals 4. It's about the feeling and the culture. And that was something I really learned from working with faith groups, and obviously my own church, the Catholic Church, how much access it gave you, whether that was in the UK, whether it was in Ireland, whether it was far away as places like Vietnam, even countries that we wouldn't consider to be very Christian. So, but from that, some of the successes of Santa Marta, when I look back and I reflected on this, we convicted people from the Philippines and helped victims who were in the UK return to the Philippines. People in London who were actually held in slavery and were exploited, assisted them to get justice. Nigeria, the projects that developed there saw the first ever convictions in Edo State. The first person convicted of trafficking in Edo State was a judge. Uganda, only in the last couple of months, an operation being launched in Uganda, Santa Marta was able to connect them with law firms, with police in the UAE, with Interpol, with Europol and the German National Police. Within 2 weeks of that information being shared, red warrants were issued by Interpol. The victims are identified, the suspect is now in custody, and a prosecution is being mounted. And all of that was a network through the church. Australia, we assisted Australia in the development of their legislation, and they now have a network there by the Catholic Church, which is about looking at supply chains. And it's probably the biggest supply chain transparency network in the world, without doubt. Argentina, to this day, is still training its police at the national level. And that follows on from a visit by Cardinal Vincent with a team of us where we went and met with all the players. And we were sat in a room with ministers from all parts of government, listening to the important role that Santa Marta could do. Brazil, we took on the role of training all the Scalabrini fathers and also helping with their understanding of foreign policy. The United States, we've got a policy and an agreement that we developed with policing and homeland security, and Lithuania, many, many projects. And these are only just 9 examples of what Santa Marta has done over the last decade or so. But the one thing that is crucial in all of these, every single one of them, is it goes to the local level. Yes, we may have the Cardinal speaking with members of Parliament or even prime ministers or people who are, political leaders or even royalty. But this was all about how whatever happens changes the front line. And that's something that people need to actually reflect on in this project that's been done in England and Wales and Ireland. That was what it was intended to do. And that is what it has achieved in many different ways. So, but if we look the figures, even to this day, we're talking about a reduction over the recent years of the number of victims being identified, but not in the UK. We're still seeing enormous increases, particularly in England and Wales, and to Ireland to a degree. So something is working. But most of the victims elsewhere in the world remain untraced. The UK has nearly as many victims identified as, say, 10 countries in Europe. That shows the amount of activity and proactivity, certainly far more by multiple times than Germany, which obviously has a bigger population than the UK. And conviction rates still run low. But the UK did develop models, as I've just shown you, where it would use different resources. And only yesterday I was at a meeting in London, which was about the religious sisters. And I recall when the religious sisters were on the front page of The Guardian as the secret tools used by the police to help get information about trafficking. And that wasn't on some small scale operation. That was a big organized criminal network. But their treatment of the victims was paramount and crucial in getting those convictions, but more importantly, on the road to recovery for those individuals involved. So when we look at, globally, we're still seeing low numbers of convictions, victim identification, and that kind of reinforces what I'm saying of the need of community work. That needs to continue. It needs to really step up. And what we've seen with the Santa Marta Group, it's looking at these issues, and this is local or international or national. It's about intervention. Where are your intervention possibilities? Where is the prevention of possibilities? Where is the criminal justice and civil justice sectors? When I say civil justice, I mean compensation. Is victim care good? Is the business sector working? What's the foreign policy, if applicable, particularly if you're living in an area that has a border, say, for example, in Kent? And what is government procurement at local and national level doing? And one thing that was brought to my attention only last week was a request we got in West Mercia, where they had done a Freedom of Information Act request. The authorities there had said, oh, we're not going to give you that information for X, Y, and Z. They were able to come back to us and we were able to say, well, they can't say that. And now they will get that information. But it just shows that the police were not giving the service even to the people who were trying to help them. Now that sounds confrontational, but it isn't. It's because the way that the letters are written, and it means that the police now realize that the community takes it seriously and therefore need to put resources into it. So the challenges that there are, and this is why we all need to keep at it, is in 2024, there was an enormous increase from, say, 10 years ago of the referrals into trafficking. And there was 20,000 plus a few numbers. And of that, as you can see, 68% were were adults and 31% were children. And then there's a number whose ages weren't known. But of the refusals last year, because of new laws and new policy, of that 20,000, we're talking about 17,000 being refused status. And that is a very large number. You know, we're talking about so many people now being refused. And if we look at where the referrals have always come from, you'd be surprised that of all the referrals, only 5% come from the non-government organisations. The rest come from statutory agencies, whether it's the police, whether it's the Home Office, whether it's the local authorities, particularly with children. But what we are seeing now is it's becoming easier and easier for the statutory agencies to say no at a very early stage. At the moment, on average, it's taking 650 days for a decision, 2 years for a decision to be made as to whether somebody is a victim of trafficking. And the Illegal Immigration Act did present some real challenges, because what it says, if somebody comes into the country undocumented, even if that is part of their trafficking, they can then be removed. And it's already been agreed that this is a breach of the European Convention of Human Rights, but also it creates a charter for criminals, because the criminals who commit these offences know absolutely that they will not be pursued, because if the victims that they've brought in, and that could be the 39 people who were brought in the lorries in Essex who died, those sort of people will have no rights and they can be removed within days. So that's something that we need to be aware of, that we need to start challenging and seeing how it's affecting the community. And it's not like we're seeing a reduction, we're seeing more trafficking. These policies haven't reduced trafficking. Of course, the UK and any country should be allowed and must be allowed to protect its borders, but not at the cost of a crime where people are bought and traded. So this will be a challenge that you get in your communities. And I know it's difficult to navigate that. But Miriam's going to talk about some new materials that we've got. And, you know, as I say, 637 days was the average. And last year, 17,000 refusals. Most of them on the basis that they were saying either they were undocumented or that they were didn't meet the threshold. Whereas years before, that would have been about 2,000 refusals. So now we've gone from, you know, a low number percentage to a very high percentage of refusals. But let's not let that be daunting. It's up to us to keep this as a priority. I'm delighted that CSAN is keeping that work on. Obviously, the materials that Santa Marta brought in and have worked with communities, I hope they've made a difference. In fact, I'm sure they've made a difference. I think the new ones that we're delivering will make another difference. But I think it's really important in England, Wales and Ireland and everywhere that we can keep this as a priority. In Ireland, it's the first country in Europe and probably the world that has brought in a statutory NRM, National Referral Mechanism, which the government have to make decisions. I think there's big problems with it because I don't think it's been thought through properly, but it does base the responsibility of victim identification and care onto the government and sharing that responsibility with NGOs. So it is a step forward. And I know that the religious sisters in particular were very fundamental in that legislation, as they were in previous legislation around prostitution and the exploitation of women. So a great deal has been achieved over the last 3 years and before. We've still got lots to do, but one thing I'm sure of is that we should never give up, because if we give up, who else is going to be looking out for these people? Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Those are the challenges. As Kevin says, we must not give up. With a view to how we can take the work forward, Miriam will now take through the materials that have been prepared for next year. Miriam.
Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see so many friendly faces, lots of people I've worked with across the UK and Ireland, and some people from overseas as well. So thank you all for joining. Yeah, as Alex says, I just wanted to kind of remind people of the resources that are on offer from Santa Marta Group, and to introduce a couple of new ones that we've developed recently that I think will be useful in the coming year. So many of you will have seen the awareness raising video that we have used in our community sessions. That, as always, is available on the website and on our YouTube for free, and we encourage you to use it and share it in any circles that you have access to. It has an accompanying handbook, the first handbook we produced, which goes into a lot of depth actually about different kinds of trafficking that are common in UK communities, and how you can respond. And in there are some template letters as well, if you'd like to write to representatives, if you're a letter writer. We've developed a couple more, which I'm now going to share on my screen, so please bear with me while I do that. Okay, can you see? Can someone unmute and tell me that they can see what I'm sharing, please?
Yeah, it's there.
Great, thank you very much. So this is the first one, which is a practical guide for churches and communities. This is a smaller handbook than the first we produced. So if you were to print it, I'd say A5, and it's 12 pages, so that works nicely. As a multiple of 4, that's something I had to think of. This goes through kind of at a glance what churches and communities can do to respond to human trafficking. So it's got a bit of an introduction as to what human trafficking is and what it might look like in your community. And then practically, what can a church do to respond? And I think this kind of is aimed at different kinds of people within the church. It might be that you're someone who wants to raise awareness, host a coffee morning, and talk about it in your parish. It might be that you're someone who's already involved in kind of loving the stranger and thinking about how we create safe environments in our churches to people who are new to the area. It might be that you want to do something to observe the feast day of St. Joseph in Bakita. It might be that you're a letter writer. There are lots of ideas within this, as well as the important numbers that you can call. So this is available for download on our website. I'll also send it round in an email to everyone who registered for this event. If you feel like you'd like a printed copy, please get in touch and we'll maybe see what we can do about that in the lead up to St. Joseph and Bakita Day. And the second resource is for Lent. This is the Way of the Cross devotional resource. This was developed in collaboration with Cardinal Nichols and the Bishops' Conference, and it's a devotional resource for Lent which relates to human trafficking throughout. Again, think about how you might be able to use this, not just personally, but in your communities as an awareness-raising resource, and as a way to honour those people who are affected by trafficking during that time of reflection in Lent. I will stop sharing now. I hope those resources will be useful. The idea of having kind of a diversity of resources is that they can suit different people's needs and different people's approaches. So please do use them and share them with anyone you think might find them useful. That's what they're there for. And I'll hand back to you, Alex, now.
Thank you for that, Miriam. And just to reiterate what Miriam is saying, certainly in the raising awareness sessions that we've held around the country with the assistance of local Caritas people shows that there is that interest out there and a willingness in parishes and dioceses for people to play their part in this. So I think those resources do enable that and encourage that. Anyways, moving on to 2026, and with Caritas Social Action Network being the point on this, I pass over to Fiona, who will be able to take us through that.
Thank you. I'm just going to try sharing my screen. There we go. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Fiona.
Great. Thank thanks so much, everyone, and thank you, Miriam, for those resources. I feel like that just shows the incredible amount of incredible legacy that we've kind of been passed to build on here, and those resources look really fantastic, and we look forward to sharing them and building on this work that you've been doing. For those of you who don't know me already, I've met quite a few of you, which has been a real treat over the last couple of months. My name's Fiona, and I work with CSAN as their Senior Migration Officer, and I've only been in post for a couple of months, so this is quite new to me, and officially our work, a funded programme of work on this begins in January. So this is very much has been a period of learning about what organisations have been doing, working with Miriam to understand this work and to think about our role going forward. So I'm going to share a little bit about what I've kind of been garnering from conversations so far from the network, and pointers about what we'll be kind of focusing on over the next year or so. And for people who don't know CSAN, we're an agency of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales, and we support a network of over 50 Catholic charities and diocesan agencies who work in solidarity with people of all faiths and none, and we share kind of rooting in Catholic understanding of human dignity. And many of you here are part of that network. And I just wanted to begin by sort of highlighting some of the work that has been happening over the last few years, which Miriam and Santa Marta have really been nurturing and supporting. So there's a huge amount of work going on across the UK in churches and in Catholic charities and dioceses to address trafficking and modern slavery. So we've got organisations in the Caritas Social Action Network who support survivors directly, and I'm sure many of you will know these organisations and encountered their incredible work and providing safe houses. So we have Caritas Westminster's Bakita House, SJOG and the Medal Trust. I'm sure many of you will have encountered. We have organisations who are advocating to improve support for survivors within the NRM and post-NRM, and a lot of groups, dioceses and charities who are involved in education in parishes and in their communities. And this is really work that Miriam's been nurturing and supporting, and I've heard a lot of really encouraging feedback from people in meeting staff and volunteers working in this area about feeling really supported by Santa Marta over the last few years in trying to drive this work forward at the local level. So we've got, I'm sure some of you are here on the call, but some amazing work by the Diocese of Arundel and Brighton around an ambassadors programme, which has been done ecumenically. Work in Middlesbrough around women in particular, and with a focus on poverty. Work in the Diocese of Nottingham that's just emerging with a focus on agricultural workers. Work in Plymouth around the exploitation of care workers and training of safeguarding leads in parishes, and work in East Anglia as well, which is really substantial, training volunteers to spot the signs. Those are just some of the incredible projects that have been emerging, and we're looking forward to continuing to support in whichever ways we can. So we've got a few years, we've got 3 years ahead of us, and we're currently in the process of discussing with groups who have been involved and wider sector partners about how we might approach this work. But I wanted to just flag a few of the things that we've been reflecting on. So obviously a programme that's rooted in Catholic social teaching, a programme that really draws on the knowledge, expertise and learning from the network, so from the Catholic diocese and the Catholic charities in the Caritas Social Action Network. and also a programme that connects more widely with ecumenical partners. I know that Santa Marta, Miriam, have been working with the Clue Initiative and other ecumenical organisations and wider sector experts as well. And I just wanted to throw in some Catholic social teaching and some scripture as well. So this from Isaiah, which I really love, this quote, just very kind of scathing rebuke of superficial acts of worship. Isaiah, yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves. Is not the kind of fasting I've chosen to loose the chains of injustice and to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke. And I wanted to just pull out a couple of quotes from Dilexi Te as well, from Pope Leo. And it's really a document that focuses on poverty, but he's really explicit that poverty is in the sense. It's not just economic, but it's also poverty of those who have no rights, who have no space, who have no freedom. So really, he's speaking here to those who are exploited, those who are trafficked, those who are in modern slavery too. And one of the threads is around listening to people who have lived experience of exploitation and what that really brings to our work. He says, their experience of poverty gives them the ability to recognize aspects of reality that others cannot see. For this reason, society needs to listen to them. All this entails one aspect of the option for the poor that we must constantly keep in mind, namely that it demands of us an attitude of attentiveness to others. This loving attentiveness is the beginning of a true concern for their person, which inspires me effectively to seek their good. And I think that's a real challenge to us in doing this work, is to think about how are we really engaging and listening to those who are impacted and making space for their voices. And there's a second emphasis throughout on the structural causes of poverty and exploitation. I think this is another thing that we can kind of bring into this area of work and build on. So I'll just read again from Dilexi Te. We need to be increasingly committed to resolving the structural causes of poverty. Society needs to be cured of a sickness which is weakening and frustrating it, and which can only lead to new crises. Welfare projects which meet certain urgent needs should be considered merely provisional responses. I can only state once more that inequality is the root of social ills. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to share as underpinnings for the work. And I've got a little slide here just to show how we might kind of begin developing this programme. So starting at the top with listening to experts by experience and building the leadership of people who have experienced slavery and trafficking. And alongside that, really building on the knowledge and the expertise of groups who have been doing this work. So reflecting together on our practice and looking at research on what's really been working in churches and what's being effective. And then some of the themes that have come out in terms of areas that people would like support in terms of building their skills or building capacity, developing resources and training are in the bottom box. So I've included awareness raising, and this is an area that a lot of groups have really run with and really found creative ways to do and have a lot of resources already there. So a lot of this work for us is to really facilitate the sharing of those resources and facilitate sharing of best practice. There's also a real acknowledgement about the challenges that people face when they're reporting experiences of exploitation, when they're reporting slavery and trafficking, and the risks that people face in doing that if they have insecure immigration status. And so thinking about how can churches create safe spaces for people to report, but also what would it look like to create safer reporting mechanisms for people so they can access the support that they need. And we've already heard about the kind of challenges of people waiting huge amount of time for support from the NRM and the number of rejections. So there's so many clear kind systemic problems that churches can be engaging with and advocating about. And there's also a really big role for people when they leave the NRM and have kind of accessed that very limited support and are then really faced with having to rebuild their lives in the UK and thinking about what role can the church play in facilitating their integration. And finally, there's also a sense of frustration once people have been doing awareness raising that they want to do something more, or that perhaps it's not enough on its own. And so we're thinking about how might we support people to do advocacy and campaigning around the drivers of exploitation and modern slavery and trafficking. So those are some of the themes that have already come out that we'll be taking forward to shape a programme. And I just wanted to say, in terms of getting involved, I'm in touch with quite a few of you already, but I would love to have a one-to-one chat with any of you to talk about the work that you've been doing, what kind of support we might be able to offer you. And in terms of what we've got coming up, we're holding regular peer sharing meetings for people from different groups to come together and share what they've been working on, ask questions, share challenges together. We've also been pooling our shared resources from across the network and from different groups so that there's not too much replication, that people can borrow and adapt each other's resources. And so far, I found it to be an incredibly generous movement, with people being really willing to share their resources. So that's been really exciting to see, and we'll be adding to those, obviously, the fantastic resources that you've just shared, Miriam. And just at the end, there's my email address for anyone to get in touch or to get on a list, so that when we launch some trainings in the new year and workshops, you will be the first to know about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. And if anybody didn't get the any of the email addresses, we will circulate them, so fear not. Okay, well, we've heard about the motivations for this work and the need for this work. We've heard about the current challenges, the available resources, and from Fiona just there, the support as the work is taken forward and how that support will develop. So now there's an opportunity really opening to the floor, to the pixels. If anybody just wanted to indicate that they wanted to contribute or ask a question, do just raise a hand. I think I have one from Russell's iPhone. Would that be right? There was a raised hand there, but not sure if that means Russell wanted to speak. Anybody else who wants to kick off? Anthony.
Turn on my audio. Am I with you?
You are.
Can you hear me? Good. No, I'm just particularly interested in partnership working and sharing. And Fiona mentioned, what was it? Plymouth, Nottingham, Rutland, Brighton. There was another one I think I missed. But East Anglia are also doing quite a bit. And it just seems very important that those things are shared. Just something to share with you, noting that Plymouth are doing stuff on care workers. I assume everybody knows about the huge problem with care workers and the visa scheme, which is now over. In my region, which is Lancashire, there's masses of social care workers going around trying to find jobs before their visa runs out, because when they arrive, there wasn't actually a job for them. Two things that we're doing. One is we're working with an organisation called Tech Against Trafficking. Tech Against Trafficking uses big data to isolate the organisations, the companies that are likely to be the ones that are most iffy. And using that data, the police went round, I think something like 20 care homes earlier this year. What they're doing at the moment is developing the idea of champions. So a champion in a particular ethnicity, I forget what those are. There's 4 or 5 of these. I think Nigeria was certainly one. I forget the others. But these people are advised to be in touch with people back home to say, just be very careful about what you are offered when you are offered opportunities in the UK, because actually it isn't like that. It is like this. So I think the idea of champions is an excellent one which others might take up.
Thank you, Anthony. Cardinal.
Yep. I'd be very interested to know, please, which might be the diocese where you've had no response, or where you're still at a starting point. Maybe I could help with those. Miriam, you'd have that at your fingertips, wouldn't you?
I do have that information. If you give me 1 minute, I'll get my spreadsheet up. Maybe we could come to Natalia and then I'll get back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank
Natalia.
I don't want to embarrass anybody publicly, but maybe I could just help.
Good evening. My name is Natalia Holinska. I am Ukrainian working for Caritas Ukraine, and I am in counter trafficking more than 20 years. My question is for those representing different dioceses and parishes from the United Kingdom as well as the other countries. Are there any vulnerable Ukrainian IDPs or refugees who are at risk of trafficking? Or have you ever faced Ukrainians who were exploited or in the situation of slavery? What can I advise to those Ukrainians who would ask me where they can find assistance, or to whom they can apply in the case of in the risk of being trafficked? It's a general question, but maybe somebody may have information and may answer. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that, Natalia. We've certainly done some work with consulates based in London for countries around the world with a view to helping them have some standard approach to people who present as potential victims of trafficking. But if there was any specific details, I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to add anything there.
Yes, thanks, Natalia. There have been quite a number of cases of trafficking of Ukrainians, even before conflict. That it was an issue in the UK and across Europe that Ukrainians were being trafficked. But in a way, the benefits now, because people from Ukraine get support, they're at less risk of being trafficked because they have got systems of support in place. But they still do get trafficked, and there is a number of cases, particularly of women from Ukraine, ended up being sexually exploited and being placed into prostitution. So there's quite a number of those cases in the UK, and forced labour. But just to give you an example of how strong community spirit has really worked, is I know where I live here in Ireland is that there's quite a large Ukrainian community that live in my area, County Limerick, and bordering County Tipperary. And a number of the Ukrainians, they're Orthodox, and they do come to our Catholic Church, but they did ask if there was any way they could celebrate their own faith. And the parish priest arranged for the Orthodox Ukrainian priest to come to our parish, and on a regular basis, not every week, but when he can, to celebrate Mass with them. And I just thought that was such a welcome for those people, that it just, they realize that they're accepted into the community and they're part of the community. And to me, it was good evidence of what the church can do to make people welcome and accompany, even though it's not, obviously very little that the Catholic Church does that I've seen is, a lot of what's being delivered is not for Catholics or Christians, particularly work abroad. It's for, doing the goodwill. And this was another example. And it takes away a lot of risks to those people because they know that they can go and speak to anybody and everybody in the community. So I've seen really good examples of what I would call real prevention. But yes, there is a lot of trafficking, or there are numbers of trafficking of Ukrainians reported in the UK. And some in Ireland as well. But if you go into places in Central Europe and Eastern Europe, particularly since the conflict, the numbers have increased.
Thank you, Kevin. Just to add to that, Peter had put in the comments that the Ukrainian Catholic Church in London has a support centre in its basement, and they may well have information there as well. So that's just another area to point people. So that's the Ukrainian Catholic Church in London. Is that okay? Thank you very much for that. Alex Miranda from Plymouth.
Hello. Just a very quick thing that Caritas Plymouth produced and published a modern slavery statement for the Diocese of Plymouth. And we discovered when contacting suppliers of major contracts for the diocese that actually that prompted in itself at least 2 of the suppliers to create and publish their own modern slavery statements. So I think it's just that multifaceted approach of really throwing an awful lot of things at the wall to try and see what's going to stick. And certainly we've found with the care sector guidance that's a signposting that has really taken off in terms of interest. And we've then had direct requests for signposting through that. But I think the modern slavery statement uptake, that was quite a surprise to us, but a very welcome surprise that people were really taking this seriously amongst the suppliers that we've contacted. And it's part of that rolling programme of assessment and monitoring of the statements to make sure that we are constantly going towards our suppliers to find out what they're doing. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Alex. And just to reiterate, certainly that has been our experience, that once people find out that this isn't just an international problem, but it is happening in their neighbourhood, the interest rises and the willingness to engage. So it is really just about drawing people's attention to it, and then they will know what to do. Begonia Iñara. If you just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Begonia.
Yes. In Spain, just to answer Natalia's question, in Spain there are many refugees from Ukraine, but they were given the work permit in 24 hours, what never happened in during the many years that refugees are being coming to Spain. So, but the police just not long time ago found a victim of trafficking from Ukraine that had come at the beginning with lorries that were and small cars that were going to fetch refugees at the border of Ukraine, at one of the borders, and they brought them here in Spain, and he was cultivating hashish that is forbidden in Spain. And it's the only one that I know that it has been, but most of them, they are working and they are well admitted and well integrated in society. That's all.
Thank you very much, Begonia. We have a few minutes before we come up to the hour. If anybody wanted a final, Natalia. Oh, that's just a thumb up. Sorry. That's
yes, I just wanted to thank to Begonia for information.
Great, thank you. Maybe
Hello,
Simon.
Yes, I just wanted to tell Natalia, just in case she doesn't know, she probably does, that we have a modern slavery helpline, as in many states and probably elsewhere, 08000 121 700, that people can ring, and it's probably the best thing that vulnerable people can do if they have the opportunity. And sort of following on from that, I just wanted to explain what we've decided to do in East Anglia. We do raise awareness in all sorts of ways for parishes and so on. But our main thrust is to equip people to learn the signs and to identify victims, potential victims of modern slavery, and report them through that modern slavery helpline. We've so far made a total of 9 reports. And we know that in 3 of those cases, we just happen to know that people have been rescued as a result. We don't know about the others.
Thank you for that, Simon.
Alexander?
Si.
Just a quick comment on Alex Miranda's. I think most dioceses should have an anti-slavery policy. I think over a certain size, I think you're required by law to have one now, if you're over a certain size. But as Miriam says, it's a good thing for you to ask in your diocese, do we have an anti-slavery policy? And then there is the investment company, CCLA, which handles a lot of church investment, and they have a very, very strong policy about anti-slavery work, and in fact put resources into it, and will give your diocese advice if you want to, how to examine supply chains and things. Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Well, could I just ask Bishop Brendan, who's joined in from the US, probably as far as anyone, if you'd like to say a word.
Well, I'm honored to be here and to listen to you. I'm succeeding Bishop Mark Seitz as the chair for Migration and Refugee Services, and he spoke so very highly of your work. And so I just pledge my assistance. I appreciate being able to listen, and in my mind, how to apply it to the United States with our dioceses. And if anything I can do to facilitate any communication with the United States, I'm 100% supportive. But I know Bishop Seitz was very proud of his work. I began my term about November 18th, so I'm about a month in to be the chair. And so I just want to give you my prayers, and I'm very impressed. I printed out the statement from Plymouth. I mean, I'm impressed with the work, so I look forward to receiving from Miriam the materials and for use here in the United States. But I definitely pledge my support for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Brendan. Hopefully we will be able to work together in the future. But thank you very much. Any final comment, or I will pass for the final word to Cardinal Vincent.
Can I just make one point, Alex? Just the booklets that you've seen today, there will be a version with different numbers, etc., for our Irish colleagues. So Liz and others who are there will be a version that will cover the telephone numbers for On Gardish Corner and the Blue Blindfold helpline number in Ireland. So that will be available also.
Right. And Natalia, we will obviously pass on all the numbers rather than just writing them here because we're coming to the end, but we'll pass them on via email. Cardinal, if you just wanted to say a final word to wrap.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody very much indeed. And, you know, this work at parish level, it has an impact, it tells a good story. And, you know, I'd be delighted to see it spread a bit more widely to other English-speaking countries through their parish networks and their bishops. I mean, that really would, I think, especially when the language isn't a problem, to be able to use this resource and to support parishes and dioceses across the world. The story of Santa Marta as a charity is at a delicate moment. As we said, you know, the Gube Foundation has supported this domestic program for 3 years, but we've also always had another kind of international program, which Kevin spoke about very eloquently. And we've always thought of it as a catalyst, as Santa Marta trying to bring together key players, but to help them to work together, not to be an agent, the Santa Marta Group itself. And since we've established as a separate charity from 2021, it's been quite difficult fundraising, and increasingly so, because charities and funders of charities want to see impact. That's what motivates them when they see something change. And that's a bit difficult when we can say, well, we had this meeting and that meeting and these people got together and we hope they're working together and we followed up a bit. So there's that aspect of the Santa Marta work that we're still looking for a good partnership so that we can continue it under a different heading. So we're looking at a number of things at home. We've talked to CAFOD, we've talked to a couple of dioceses, we're going to talk to Caritas Europa, maybe Caritas Internationalis, some of the initiatives in Rome, that just so to see, hopefully, that they can take on this very, very specific role of being a catalyst, among others. I don't think anybody else does it. At least a few years ago when we had a major meeting at the UN, it was perfectly clear that nobody else was doing that. So if you'd keep that in your prayers, if you've got any ideas, we've got a number of months yet in order to find a response, as we found in CSAN, which is so very encouraging, and for which I would like to express my sincere thanks to everybody. Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. And at this stage, we wish you all the best for the Christmas and for the continued work against trafficking. Thank you very much.
A few more messages coming in.
They are.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Unless we wanted to finish with another prayer.
Kevin wants the last word.
No, I was just saying goodbye to everybody.
Oh, you see. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
We just say glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Happy Christmas.
Amen.
God bless.